Om Tat Sat. My humble prostrations to the all-pervading Brahman or God, to my worshipful Guruji, Swami Jyotirmayananda Maharaj, to all the sages and saints of this world, and to each of you, divine soul, watching today's satsang. Today we will be studying Sutra number 15 from the Vibhuti Pad of the Raja Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Commentary by my Guruji, Swami Jyotirmayananda ji, narrated by myself, Swami Nikhilananda. So let's get started. Sutra number 15, Vibhuti Pad. Krama anyatvam parinama anyatve hetuhu. Let's repeat. Krama anyatvam parinama anyatve hetuhu. That means the difference in modifications is due to the difference in the succession of changes. So, as we were describing in the previous sutras, the changes are happening due to modifications in the successive changes. Although it looks as one, but there is constant change behind it. Just like the fan, for example, when the fan is rotating, you can't even tell how many blades it has till you stop it, because the succession is going so fast that your eye is viewing it all as one motion, whereas it's really one change at a time, isn't it? The same thing that you see in a movie as well. It's one frame at a time, but when you combine it, it looks like a continuous flow. So that is what Sage Patanjali is explaining in more detail here, that it is due to the difference in the succession of these changes. Now, one thing is there, these sutras are very deep, and some of you may say, why are we getting into this level of minutia? But this is how Samadhi is attained, through focusing and analyzing every little fiber of the process itself. If you even think about scientists and stuff, right? I mean, they are going through their microscopes, or they are seeing all this activity that we cannot see with our normal eyes. So these, the same thing the yogis of India have done through this intense practice. They have been able to go through all these, but in this case, the instrument is not a microscope, but it's their own body and their own mind. Through their intuitive intellect, they have been able to differentiate and process these things. So that is why it's important that we understand the significance of these sutras. And Vibhuti means glories, and we are in this Vibhuti Pad chapter. So please understand that once the fundamentals become clear and you understand what the yogis are trying to do, and to kind of give us the foundational building blocks, then we can go and create lots of things with it. Through this tapas, through this samadhi experience, the yogis get the vibhuti, which means glories of God. They can see the past, present, and future. They can leave their body at will. All these things may sound strange or even impossible to an average person, but to the yogis and to the serious tapasvis, these are their realities. But they don't show it, they don't advertise it, they don't want any money for it. This is a holy path, as we said. This is not to be advertised and marketed, and therefore we see in this Kali Yuga, very few people actually truly have these siddhis, because we are trapped in this material world, and therefore we haven't been able to go into the subtle depths of our own consciousness. And therefore, but in the time Sanatan Dharma, when all these things were there, this was happening on a daily routine basis. So it's our humble attempt to revive this knowledge so we can find that peace and tranquility, and also advance in our practice. But the meaning, I'm taking some time to explain these things, because we need some patience here. We don't have to do this in a hurry. So take your time, understand, build your sadhana practice, understand the depths of what Sage Patanjali is guiding us with, and then hopefully we will also be able to practice better and find peace. and more and more progress as a result. So different successions of changes give rise to different modifications. That is the essence of these successions. Different stages, different results. When water is frozen into ice, it looks like ice. Nobody calls it water, we call it ice. And then when it becomes it evaporates, we call it vapors. And when it's back in the water form, we call it water. So therefore the states change also, but it's the same properties, it's the same essence. So there is a succession of reducing it. So the succession of change is true with all objects. So that is what we are trying to talk about in this nature of consciousness. Everything that has a beginning, middle, and an end goes through this successive process. Even our bodies, our minds, everything. So having described these modifications, they have their sway over all objects of the world and also over the mind and senses itself. So Raja Yoga now proceeds to describe the siddhis that are attained by practicing samyama on the three parinamas described that we had talked about: dharma, lakshana, and avastha. Remember those three we had talked about in Sutra number 13. So when a yogi starts focusing on those and starts getting very skilled in it, he practices samyama. Samyama means concentration, focus, concentration, meditation, and then samadhi. Those three stages of the Ashtang Yoga. Remember, the first five are just physical, the last three are more internal. Dharana, dhyana, samadhi. Concentration, focus, intense concentration, and then the samadhi state. So when you combine the three, it's called the samyama. So that is what these advanced sages and yogis do. They have reached that state of samyama where they can just focus and they instantly get that state, and they focus on an object and they're able to dissect the differences and so on, which we will be covering in more detail in the future sutras. But then through their tapas, through their practice, they are able to basically identify and experience the glories which are outside most human capabilities. Most people will think that, oh, how is this even possible? But as I was explaining, that this is how, through their constant meditation and consciousness and understanding the nature of these things. So according to Raja Yoga, Prakriti is the basic stuff that modifies into all objects of the world. So there are only five: earth, water, fire, air, ether. This is called Prakriti. Prakriti, or things that are modifying and changing, and they are always going through this constant process. But only these five elements combined, or different combinations thereof, make the whole universe, including our entire body. Only these five. So look at God's plan in the divine project. An aspirant is now instructed to recognize the dharmi or prakriti by intuitive vision born of samadhi. So you have to reach to that transcendental samadhi state where the practice has to become so fine-tuned that we can focus on any object or anything, and then we are able to dissect that. The understanding of this topic is the key to acquiring different psychic powers by the practice of samyama. So now soon we will be entering into the different kind of siddhis or psychic powers that are attained, and as I told you, those were frequently possible in the olden times because people had that level of discipline. They maintained brahmacharya, they were properly guided for years. They would practice this and they had a sole focus. But for most worldly people, these are not important because even whether you get them or you don't get them, the path is towards finding peace and connecting with God. Even these siddhis, sage Patanjali with himself will later guide us that those are obstacles on the way to our spiritual progress. Although they feel very good, you feel that you have transcended and reached a different place, but that's not the end goal of the main process, the objective, so to speak. So this is Sutra number 15. We will be covering Sutra number 16 tomorrow. This is Swami Nikhilananda. Om Tat Sat.